This is A Closer Look, a program about being differently abled in the 21st century, produced by the Community Council on Disability Awareness.
Welcome to our show, Taking a Closer Look. My name is Dr. Daryl Greene, and this is Taking a Closer Look, Being Differently Able in the 21st Century. This show is being sponsored by the Community Council on Disability Awareness of Wayne County, Indiana. For short, we are known as the CCDA. And this show is about the problems of and possibilities for the disabled living in the 21st century. And believe me, this is a great century to be alive. And with that in mind, today we're going to be taking a look at living with blindness. And now I'd like to introduce my most amazing and talented guest, Lowell Conley and his wife Marcia, and they're going to share a little bit about what their life has been like living with retinosis pigmentosus. So, Lowell, thank you for being on the show today, and I thank you, Marcia, too, and for being willing to share your life's journey with us. And can you tell us where you were born and where you grew up?
Yes, I was born in a little mining town back in the woods of Tennessee, similar to the towns that Loretta Lynn and Tennessee Ernie Ford sing about, and lived there till I was around 7 years old. Then we moved to, the town was called Ravenscroft, Tennessee. And we moved to Livingston, Tennessee, where my dad operated a restaurant for a while. And I guess you might say we went broke in that because it was during the Depression. We moved back to Ravenscroft, which the mines had closed down. And we got a free house because the company just abandoned the town, and we moved back there. And after so long a time, we realized that if we didn't get out of there and move somewhere else, we was going to starve because times were tough back then. and my dad hitchhiked to Indiana with my uncle and found a job finally at the International Harvester here in Richmond.
And how old were you when you moved to Richmond?
I was around 6 or 7 years old, 6, I guess.
So, and how did you first learn of your vision problems?
My mother noticed when I was a baby that I would run into things, and she noticed it, probably by the time I was 6 months old. I was born with a disease called RP, or retinitis pigmentosa. And
Retinitis pigmentosa.
right.
All right, and that's where you lose your peripheral vision first.
Yes, retinitis pigmentosa is a disease that gradually, as you get older, it deteriorates. But when I was young, I could see to ride a bicycle. I could not see to determine features on people's faces, but I could see to ride a bicycle, and I pretty much could see how to get around. But as I got older, it got worse, and now I've probably got 95% total blindness,
And so you're basically totally blind, but you have a little bit of light perception.
That's it. That's
So you
just
can
about.
tell if you're indoors or outdoors.
Yes, I can determine when the sun's out.
All right. And so were you able to go to regular public school, or how did you get your education?
I went to school in Tennessee for a short period of time, which I never was able to read, read small print, and I enrolled at Nicholson School. And
Here in Richmond?
They determined pretty soon after I enrolled in school that I could not, that wasn't a place for me. So in 1937, I went to the Indiana School for the Blind.
And you were born in 29, right?
28.
28. So at about age 9 or 10, you went to the school for the deaf, for the blind.
Right.
And that's where?
That's in Indianapolis.
Now, is that something that you, is that a boarding school, or how did that work?
Yes, it was at that time it's still a boarding school, but they don't stay there on the weekends. Back then they did, because people didn't have the means to transportation that they do now, and sometimes we got to come home every 6 weeks, or as I got older and got interested in different things that was on the weekend, I didn't come home quite as often.
So what kinds of things did they get to learn at the school for the blind?
Actually, the same curriculum as public schools, except that they had extra. They had studied math, history, and general science, and the same basic subjects as they do in public schools, except that we learned to do all of this stuff in Braille. And also,
so you learned how to read Braille and do math in Braille too, right?
Right. But they also offered courses like in woodworking, piano tuning, broom making, chair caning, and we had gym classes, we had choir, orchestra, band, all this stuff.
So were you able to play like baseball or football, or what kind of things do you do in a gym class?
Well, we did play football, run into each other and so forth, but the only actual sport that we could compete in was wrestling. And they did compete with other sighted schools in wrestling.
And so once you got a hold of somebody, you could hold your own, right?
Yes,
All right. Well, and what is so you had the benefits of a classical education as well as some vocational training.
Right. Yeah, we had very good, dedicated teachers. We did dramatics. We had plays, and we had teachers back then that was really devoted to their work, and I really thank God that they were devoted, because I really learned a lot and learned to be independent from
So
going
you
there.
feel you owe a debt of gratitude to them.
Yes.
And you played the piano piece so beautifully. And did you learn how to play the piano and other instruments at the School for the Blind?
Yes, I'll tell you how that came about. You could take, in order to get a credit in school, they had practice rooms where you could practice 4 days a week and take a music lesson on the 5th day.
All right.
And you had to take either violin or piano for 2 years. Then you could go to another instrument if you wanted to, but they recommended you play piano or violin. And so I came home one summer for a summer vacation, and my brother had borrowed a horn from the Salvation Army, and it was lying on the bed. So
All right.
I picked it up, went out and sat down on the porch swing, and started tooting around on it. And I had $25 saved up, and I had to have me a horn. So I went up to Kring's music store and bought me a $25 horn.
All right. So you were a young budding musician.
Pardon?
You were a young budding musician.
Yes, my ambition was to play in combos and bands, which I did for many years.
And so you have been entertaining in the Richmond area and surrounding communities for a long time now. But what are some of the other kinds of occupations that you've had?
Well, I learned piano tuning at the blind school, and the first job I had after I graduated from high school in 1949, I went to work at the Star Piano Company. Now, a lot's been said about the Star Piano Company recently, and I don't know how many of us are left that work there, but I actually did work there and was a piano tuner. Later, I worked at the Jesse French Piano Company in Newcastle. From there, I went to work in a darkroom, Berg's Camera Shop uptown. I went from there and I worked at the blind school for 4.5 years, teaching broom making and chair caning.
So you actually went back to the School for the Blind as a teacher.
Yes, instructor.
And how old were you when you did that?
26
26-year-old. So
or 25.
some of the students were too much younger than you.
Yeah, that's right. And 17 of my students that I had, they're deceased, and probably more, but that's how many I know of.
And what all did you teach for them?
I taught broom making and chair caning.
All right.
They don't teach that anymore because since computers came on the scene, the blind people's been able to hold down jobs that they couldn't hold before due to the software that you can get on computers.
Right.
And it's enabled a lot of blind people to get jobs that they wasn't able to get before.
Well, what interests me is that you were able to learn how to work with your hands in spite of vision problems, and you got good vocational training. And what are some of the jobs that you were able to have after you left the School for the Blind?
Well, I had a broom shop at one time here in Richmond, and I tuned pianos on my own for many years here in town. And I worked at Nettle Creek Industries, and I worked at Reed Hospital in the darkroom.
What did you do at Nettle Creek?
I did several jobs. When I first went in there, you know, they just had me on one job, but they would run out of work frequently, and they'd ask me, you know, I'd say, I can do this job, and they'll say, no, you'll mash your fingers off. And I said, well, let me try it and see if I do. It's my fingers. And pretty soon I was doing several different jobs because we'd frequently run out of work.
So you were working with automated machinery.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And I understand you were a pillow stuffer or cotton stuffer.
A cotton packer.
All right. and so that was a factory job. What did you do after that?
I worked on my own for several years, just tuning around town here. I was figuring up the other day that I've tuned in 40 different churches here in Richmond.
Isn't that amazing?
And I played music. Back in the 50s, I played 5 and 6 nights a week in Fort Wayne. And
So you're a professional entertainer.
yes, and then in 1960, I traveled with the Republican Party all over Indiana and played the Steam Calliope and had the opportunity of meeting.
A steam calliope.
Yes. And
That's an instrument you don't see every day.
I know. They didn't, I told them I couldn't play it, so they determined that I could, so I took it down in the woods where no one could hear me and practiced one afternoon, and the next morning I took off with the motorcade, and I had the opportunity of meeting Richard Nixon and had my pictures made with him.
All right. Now, you not only had an industrious vocational career and been able to maintain yourself in that way, but you're also a family man, and you have some children. And how did you meet Marcy?
That's an interesting story. I think I'll let my wife tell that one.
All right.
Well, I've told it several times, but I lived in Connersville, and I was widowed at the age of 42. And they had a widowed person service down there, so I was into that. And one evening, another widow and I came to Richmond to the Armory for a pitch-in. And it was a singles club meeting. And I told my friend, I said, well, I've heard about those singles clubs, and if they're drinking, I'm out of there. So we went, and we were sitting at the table finishing up our supper. And my friend was on my left, and there was an empty chair on my right. And pretty soon, something bumped into the back of my chair, and I thought, oh, I knew there'd be...
Something or someone?
Well, I didn't know at the time. And I thought, I knew there'd be somebody here drinking, probably. So I turned towards my friend. I didn't even see who sat down or what was going on. And finally, I heard this man's voice, and he didn't sound like he'd been drinking. He sounded pretty good. And he was telling his little funny jokes, and everybody seemed to like him. So I just turned around, and I saw he had a collapsible cane on the table, so I knew then why he bumped into me.
So you knew
That's how we met.
So you knew he was blind when you first met.
Uh-huh.
And what interested you about him in spite of his blindness?
His personality.
Mm-hmm.
I was really impressed with the way he was talking, and everybody seemed to like him. And my friend that I came with knew him. So before the evening was over, he got my phone number.
All right.
He must have memorized it.
And you told me before that the fact that he's a Christian man
Oh, yes.
had a lot to do with it.
Yes. It's real important that he's a Christian. And then also I enjoyed his music. I was proud of him for doing that. And we were married, that was in
So you
April.
were one of his groupies.
Yes, one of his fans. We were married in September.
Of
and
which year?
Of the same year. I met him in April, and he tells everybody we didn't have that much time since we were in our 40s and 50s. Although he did fib to me about his age. He told me he was 48, but he was really 53, I found out later.
All right. And so what is it like to live with someone that's blind?
Well, you know, actually it didn't seem too hard for me. I loved him, and I will admit the first date we had I was a little nervous about, you know, if I would pay or he would pay and all that, but we got along pretty good. I did lose a few friends by marrying a blind person. They were supposed to be my friends. And his mother helped me a lot. She gave me pointers on, you know, what he liked to eat and different things, and to keep things in the same place, which wasn't hard for me because I've always been an organized person, and I've always not liked clutter. I like to have a place for everything and keep everything in its place. And
so,
he does that too.
So that's very important when you live with someone with a visual impairment, that
Yes.
things are neat and organized, that everything has its own place,
Right.
so that you can find it and not trip over things.
Now, we do kind of lose the cordless phone and the remote sometimes.
You have to put beepers on those.
Yes, we do.
Well, what are some of the things that are difficult for you, Lowell, because of your blindness? Obviously, you're not able to drive.
Well,
Your difficulties?
it's hard to answer that question because I've been this way all my life, and so I've just accepted it, and I've never been bitter over it. Or naturally, I would like to be able to drive or read music so I could play, by music and so forth. And there's things that I'd like to do, but I don't dwell on that. I just try to keep my faith in the good Lord, and
Right.
it's more important to me these days that I please Him than I do myself.
All right. So pleasing God is the primary concern of your life. That's
Mine
a
too.
wonderful thing. What are some social situations that might bother you?
Okay, well, so many people have different conceptions of blindness. Some people think that, so for instance, they'll think that maybe Marcia has to dress me or feed me or whatever. A lot of, you don't know what people's thinking. And we find that sometimes when we're at say a church dinner or something, that some people have a tendency to shy away from us, me especially, because they feel uncomfortable and they don't know how to deal with it.
So you might find yourself sitting alone at a church dinner.
Yeah,
and
that's
things like
happened a few
that.
times.
Not all the time.
Not all the
It
time.
helps when you're an entertainer because everyone knows you, right?
Yeah,
And they have a topic of conversation,
yeah.
your music.
But I've made a lot of friends through my music and through the fact that I don't mind talking about blindness, but I don't dwell on it. And I'm not touchy about if someone wants to bring it up, fine, but I just don't think about it that much.
Now we have just a couple minutes left, so I want to give you a chance to share with us what words of encouragement would you have for people who might be facing vision loss or any kind of difficulty in their life.
Well, I'll share a little story with you. That won't take too long. But this one friend of mine, that when he first came to the blind school, he could see good enough to play basketball, and he loved to play basketball. One year he ran a nail in his eye, and he came back to school totally blind. He sat in a chair for a good while, and one of his other blind friends walked up to him and he said, "Bob, you better get up out of that chair because it's going to be a long time you're going to have to sit in that chair." And he said, "I'm blind and I'm not sitting in here, so get up and get off of it." And he went up and got a basketball, went over to the gym, and started shooting baskets.
All right. Marcia, what words of encouragement would you have?
I'd like to add first that Lowell does do a lot. He fixes things around the house, and if he can't fix it, he gets someone that can. And if we're riding in the car and it has a strange noise, he knows what's wrong with it. But I would say for anyone that lives with or knows a handicapped person to just help them when they need it and let them do what they can to be independent.
All right, so the caregiver needs to be helpful and supportive when needed, but give the person with a disability as much independence as possible.
Absolutely. That's what I've learned.
And with that in mind, Lowell's going to take us out with another beautiful piano piece. And while he's playing, I just want you to think about this, that all things work together for good, for those who love God, to those who are called according to His purposes. And and nothing can separate us from the love of God, not sickness or disability or anything else in life. So with that in mind, listen to Lowell's piano and
Trumpet.
keep looking up, and God bless.
A Closer Look, a program about being differently abled in the 21st century, produced by the Community Council on Disability Awareness. The Community Council on Disability Awareness meets on the third Wednesday of the month at 12 noon in the community room at the City of Richmond Municipal Building.
Copies of this program are available by contacting Whitewater Community Television at 765-973-8488 or email WCTV@indiana.edu. 765-973-8488 or email WCTV@indiana.edu.